My computer is giving me a message that says that I am unstable. Never a truer word has a computer spoken. Good morning. Today is Tuesday, August 26, 2025. Tzedek, tzedek, tirdof. Famous verse near the beginning of our Torah portion of Shoftim. And it's very poetic. Justice, justice shall you pursue. Why the double word tzedek? Why is the word tzedek, justice, repeated? It cannot mean that you should vigorously pursue justice. Often in the Torah, when a word is double, it means to vigorously do it. But it can't mean that here, because if that was what the pasuk was trying to tell us, it's the word tirdof that would be repeated. Tzedek, tirdof, tirdof. Because tirdof means to pursue. So that would mean to vigorously pursue justice. Tzedek, tzedek, repeating the word justice has to mean something else. And there are many interpretations of this. I'll just give you a couple. One interpretation given by the Talmud is that we're talking about two different kinds of justice. One is a justice that is based on din, strict formal law, and the other is a kind of a justice that's based on pshara, on compromise. You remember we've discussed this before, that in any monetary dispute between two parties, the two parties can decide when they go to Bet Din that they want their case to be adjudicated based on din, the formal law. One person will win, one person will lose. Excuse me. Or they can both decide that they would like their case to be adjudicated based on pshara, compromise, finding somewhere in the middle based on the relative strengths of the argument so that no one completely wins and no one completely loses, but the strength of the argument will decide what the actual outcome will be. We've discussed that before. So the Torah means to tell us that you should pursue tzedek if you're dealing with din, strict justice. Excuse me. And you should also pursue tzedek, justice, if you're dealing with pshara, if you're dealing with compromise, because that also leads to justice. Okay. Second answer goes like this. Halach achar bezdin yafeh. You should find a worthy Bet Din, a worthy Jewish court. Meaning, tzedek, if you're going for justice, tzedek tirdof, you have to go to the right place for justice. If you go to a Jewish court where there is corruption, God forbid, or there is a lack of expertise, God forbid, then you're not going to a place where there's going to be actual justice. I wish it was the case that every established Bet Din was upright and had a high reputation. But unfortunately, I'm sad to say that that's not always the case. And so in pursuing justice, you have to look in the right place. You have to find a house of justice, a Bet Din, that itself will lead to justice. And then there's a third point, a third answer. This answer is given by the Kotzker Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotz. And he says, tzedek, tzedek tirdof means that you should pursue justice, and your pursuit of justice must also be with justice. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof, pursue justice in a way that is just. If you pursue justice by giving someone a bribe, even though the answer is going to be the correct answer, that is not justice. If you pursue justice by not telling the truth when you testify, or not divulging certain information, even though the answer that will come is going to be the true answer, that is violating this prohibition. The ends do not justify the means. And I know that there are many situations when a person following the rules is, for whatever reason, not able to find justice because of technicalities or because of all kinds of reasons. In that case, we have to simply rely on the judge of all of us, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, the King of Kings, who will impose the correct judgment as God sees fit. But we cannot take the law into our own hands. The ends do not justify the means. Now, this concept that the ends do not justify the means is true in every area of serving God. We're not allowed to do something that is not completely legal in order to earn a windfall of money in order to give it to tzedakah, no matter how important that tzedakah may be. And I've told you before, Rav Moshe Feinstein says that if a person uses dishonesty and then uses those funds for tzedakah, it is a worse sin, because not only have they violated the prohibition of whatever chicanery they engaged in, but they're also engaging in a chillul Hashem and a desecration of God's name, as if to say you could serve God by doing something that is wrong. No, it's not true. And it applies in every area of life. We do not decide how to serve God. We follow what God tells us. We follow how God tells us to serve. And if we think we have a better idea of how to reach a certain goal, it's immaterial if it violates what God has commanded us. We see this throughout the Torah. You remember a number of weeks ago we learned about the Meraglim, the spies, and they came back with a negative report, and the people were hysterical. And Hashem said, no, because of that, you're going to have to wander in the desert for 40 years. And you know, the next day, the Torah tells us there were a group of people that said, no, we're going now. We're going now. It's okay. Hashem promised it. We're going now. And Moshe warns them, you can't do that. God said you have to wait the 40 years. God will not be with you. But they didn't listen. They thought that they could get to the goal of entering the land of Israel, which is, after all, what God wanted. But they thought they could do it their way, not the way that God told them. And of course, they were met by enemies and they were killed. It's not enough to say, my intention was good, or he's a good person. The means to serve God are decided by God. Because it is always true that there are factors we know nothing about. We may think what we're doing is good, but if we're not following God's commands, then we're not. Rabbi Yisroel Salanter gives the following parable that explains this. There were two kings of neighboring kingdoms, and they were friends. let's say, King John and King George. Mythical, fictional kings. So King John made a bet with King George of 1,000,000 rubles, a lot of money, that King John could convince the prime minister of King George to take off all of his clothes in front of him. King George says, that's ridiculous. My prime minister would never take off all of his clothes in front of you. So King John says, okay, well, put your money where your mouth is. Let's bet 1,000,000 rubles. But here's the deal. You can tell your prime minister, King George, you can tell your prime minister any instruction you want to tell him, but you cannot tell him about this deal that we have, about this wager that we have going on. Okay. So King George called in his prime minister. He told him that he was sending him to visit King John. And he told him that when he went to the kingdom of King John, he could do whatever he wanted except one thing. He may not take off all of his clothes. Prime Minister said, obviously, not going to take off my clothes in front of King John. I mean, that's under no circumstances. Okay, so the prime minister traveled to the kingdom of King John. And King John gave the prime minister an audience with all of his ministers and advisors in his throne room. And King John asked the prime minister, what happened to you that you became a hunchback? The prime minister said, I'm not a hunchback. And King John says, of course you're a hunchback. And all of the advisors and everyone agrees. Everyone says, you're a hunchback. Nebel, you're a hunchback. And the prime minister is adamant that he's not a hunchback. So the King John says to this prime minister, I tell you what, we'll make a wager. I will give you 250,000 rubles if you prove that you are not a hunchback. Now, the prime minister remembered what the instruction was from King George, but, I mean, this is a no-brainer. He's going to get $250,000. Rubles. 250,000. It's easy because he knows he's not a hunchback. And he figured he would take the money. He wasn't going to keep it all for himself. He would go back to King George and he'd split the money with him. Look, I brought you back all this money for nothing. Cost you nothing. So the prime minister took off all his clothes. Everyone saw that he was not a hunchback. And King John gave him 250,000 rubles. The prime minister was very, very happy. And he came back to his country, and he came back to his king, King George, and he said to him, I have good news. I've brought back all this money, 250,000 ruble, and I'm going to split it with you. And it took me nothing. It cost me nothing. All I had to do was take off my clothes to show them. And King George says, you think you did me a favor? You think you won from me 250,000 ruble? You didn't win from me 250,000 ruble. You lost 1,000,000 ruble. I told you not to do it, and you didn't listen. And because you didn't listen, it ends up costing me 1,000,000 ruble that I lost because of you. We have to follow the commands of our King, of Hashem. Even when we think that we know a better way to get to the result. even though we think that we have a better way to serve Hashem, because we don't know all the factors. And so tzedek, tirdof, we have to pursue justice in a way that pursues justice. We have to serve Hashem in every area of life in the way that Hashem commands us to serve Hashem. Because we have no idea of all the factors involved. Tzedek, tirdof. The ends do not justify the means. The means in every area of life must also be in accordance with God's commands. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person. Have a wonderful day.